Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from Chvrches, titled The Bones of What You Believe. But first I have to make a confession for you. I love synth pop. I know, if you take a look back through my review discography, it's so hard to tell. But really, it's always interesting for me delving into new synth pop acts, at least on the surface. Even though I was not born in the 1980s, I've always had a certain affection and fascination with the genre and its various permutations, whether or not it's the synthesizers that were rough and experimental throughout the late 70s and early 80s. This is somebody who can listen to Styx unironically, after all, and who are adding that edges and currents of unearthly unease to post-punk and early synth pop, or whether it's not this surging moody darkness of darkwave, or even the mutated hybrid of everything that's popular now in synth pop, which draws upon pop traditions, the mainstream rise of EDM, and pretty much everything in between. To me, synth pop has always been an attractive genre. Yes, even with the evolution of vocoders and auto-tune. I still find it interesting, and I still think that good music can be made on it. Now, for me, I tend to gravitate towards synth pop that attempts toward organic instrumentation, like electronic rock, where the synths support and augment the singers rather than swallow them whole. And while I have a passion for weirdness, I listen to psychedelic rock after all, I'm very much aware that the additional dynamic is very difficult to capture, particularly when you have some performers who choose to have their unearthly electronics operate as the basis of the weirdness, instead of it coming from their vocals or their subject matter. Incidentally, that's always been one of my consistent issues with the Postal Service. Now, hang on fans, I'm not dissing the Postal Service here, I just need to describe this issue. I understand their appeal, juxtaposing the very emotionally driven lyrics with the highly synthetic delivery and instrumentation. It's effective. I can understand that, but I don't quite connect with it in the same way that I connect with some of the other albums from Death Cab for Cutie. That lack of connection, incidentally, is one of the reasons why I like Kanye West's 808s and Heartbreak as much as I do. It's probably my favorite album of his. It's an album about isolation and retreating inwards, and the auto-tune that Kanye uses perfectly encapsulates his attempted separation from both humanity at large and his own humanity inside. So, with all those thoughts in mind, what did I find on the debut album from Chvrches, a new synth pop act who released their first EP last year to some degree of critical acclaim and have presented a full-length debut here with The Bones of What You Believe? Well, it's definitely interesting. That's for damn sure. In terms of indie synth pop, Chvrches have delivered a hell of a good album here with The Bones of What You Believe. And unlike most synth pop, it stretches beyond the simply solid instrumentation and good production and great vocals into some truly fascinating themes and lyrics. A lot of people have criticized early 80s synth pop about, well, not really being about much, but yet this album attempts to go that step further. And while I'm not quite convinced that it's a masterpiece, it's definitely something that I can recommend because it's a very good, oftentimes great album. Let me start off with the instrumentation first, and the production, which many could have deemed having deep roots in the synth pop of the early 80s, with defiantly inorganic synths that have a lot of booming impact and presence. There are definitely some exposed edges here that reflect the modern edge of everything, with some keyboard segments coming across with a distinctly crisp edge, but it's modulated effectively by these heavier and thicker beats and effects that can make the mix feel busy, but not precisely cluttered. There's a difference here. Furthermore, as stridently electronic and inorganic as this band is, the production is surprisingly rich and organic, giving the sound a lot of breathing room and swell, allowing the tracks to grow and have some real presence. And well, I could make the case that this production is probably better suited for more organic instrumentation. I'm not going to criticize it here when it works as well as it does. And it does good things for a lot of the electronic elements here. And on top of that, the band has a gift for solid, catchy melodies and great hooks that stick in the brain rather impressively well, with a lot of upbeat energy and character on their own, which shows a degree of populism that you didn't always get from those early 80s synth pop acts who were looking to be weird and looking to alienate people however they could. In fact, I don't even think that the early 80s comparison really holds up the same way anymore. I think the better comparison is with Heartthrob by Tegan and Sara that came out earlier this year. No, I'm not going to compare the albums. You can't make me. Now, it also definitely helps matters that the clarion and distinctive voice of Lauren Mayberry is a great contrast to this particular brand of what some people would consider a little bit abrasive synth pop. It's a little harsh, it's a little grating, it's a little blaring at points. To me, her voice slides very comfortably between that of Savage's frontwoman Jenny Beth and Metric frontwoman Emily Haynes, and she picks up the best elements from both singers, the dignity and poise from the former, and the innocent approachability and the sly bits of wit from the second. It's a credit to the vocal production that she's able to stand out against this instrumentation that could have easily swallowed up her thinner voice whole, and it's a big credit as a singer that she manages to come out with a ton of emotion and real personality and charisma on her delivery. I was impressed. Even with auto-tune, this girl can really sing, and I found myself captivated and hooked. Former lead singer Martin Doherty is solid enough on his featured songs, really, but really, Mayberry is what makes this album work as well as it does. And with that, we have to get to the lyrics and the subject matter of this album, because it goes in a bold and some people would say very quite dangerous direction for a synthpop album. Hell, for any kind of album. You see, the theme of this album is encapsulated in its title. The Bones of What You Believe is an album about showing how everything that you believe is hollow and worthless and dead, and you should let go. Emphasis on you, by the way. Let me stress that. Chvrches primarily uses that second-person pronoun in the majority of their songs, and in the wrong hands, this sort of direct assault on their audience could definitely be considered abrasive or obnoxious if it wasn't delivered with some degree of nuance or substance. They could have easily gone the same way as, say, Fall Out Boy with Save Rock and Roll, an album that was ultimately fatally crippled by the majority of its lyrics focused on reprimanding its audience. Now, fortunately for all of us, Chvrches are a smart enough act to include that degree of nuance and detail to make it work, and Mayberry is a great singer to not come across as gloating, and she gives a very measured and emotional performance. As an example, she plays the neglected sister of the favored son very well in The Mother We Share, and her delivery carefully balances that suppressed anger and regret at being neglected, and yet the fact that she still loves her brother all the same. That morally ambiguous framing through the vocals does a great job in framing subsequent songs about various forms of collapsing relationships, throughout the tired weariness of We Sink to the explosive anger of Gun. If anything, I do feel this is one of the places that the album could have gotten a little bit more mileage out of its theme, could have stretched itself a little bit further, because while there are subtle emotional distinctions between the various collapsing relationships and the various things that the guy is trying to hold on to here, I think that a greater variety of subjects could have given this album a little bit more distinctive flavor. Of course, the big exception to that is the very ambitious science vision, where a person under pressure is forced to confront questions that he can't possibly understand and that fly in the face of everything that he knows, and yet he still attempts to ask those questions anyway. He still attempts to understand something that cannot be known. It's a very powerful thing, and as somebody who has a science background, I really dug the hell out of it. And really, that complaint about not going in greater direction, that's a minor nitpick, considering how well Chvrches does exploring the various relationship cases that they do have. For me, the one that stood out very strongly was Lies. It was a real album highlight for me, as it shows how a guy desperate to recapture the elements of an old relationship ends up reshaping his new relationship into that. And the girl, who only wants to make him happy, yet knows in her gut that something is going terribly wrong, sinks into that miserable lie all the same in a hope that they might stay together. It's a depressing as hell song, and I'll give her this, Lauren Mayberry sells the hell out of it. However, and this is something about the album that I really did surprise me and that I really liked. Halfway through the album, there's a song called Under the Tide, which is this stridently optimistic song that seems to fly in the face of the album's theme. And Doherty, as the primary singer, sings it with enough quiet hope and optimism that it's almost enough to convince you that his beliefs might not be dead after all. Hell, it makes the follow-up song Recover, where a song that returns to that second-person sound like that of a girl returning to the relationship. She's wary, she's cautious, but she's still willing to go on with it just the same in the faintest hope that something might be dredged up, that it might somehow work out. And of course, given the title of the album, things go wrong all over again, but this time the album ends with You Caught the Light, the second song by Doherty as the audience surrogate that really really anchors this album. It's at this point that the you in question, which is represented musically by Doherty, comes to the realization that his dreams and beliefs and grand schemes might not be the ones that matter ultimately in the end in comparison with greater truths or what his partner might actually want, or say, reality. It's a moment of humility and quasi-redemption that bookends this album really quite well, and it seems an album designed to puncture ignorance or the belief that we're all the center of the universe and everything that we believe and everything that we want are ultimately all that should matter in the end. And in that respect, it works incredibly well by framing itself in the events of terms of human relationships, something to which we can all relate. Furthermore, it's not preachy. It's very much enhanced with that degree of emotional nuance, which it desperately needed to pull something like this off. This is a tough theme for an album to go forward on, and I gotta be honest, Chvrches nails it. So, yeah, if you can't tell, I think this album is pretty damn great, and it takes a lot of risks for a debut album that most bands would not take. Chvrches have made a pretty potent album here that definitely lives up to its roots and its hype, and well, I think it could have been a little bit better with maybe a broader scope in terms of its concept, or maybe a little bit more instrumental diversity. I want to see some of that guitar come out. It came out a few times. It sounded really good. I just want to hear a little bit more of it. I'm inclined to give this album a strong 8 out of 10, and with definite potential to go up. I know this is a little bit low, but I got a feeling this album is going to grow on me, so don't be surprised if you see it as a serious contender for my top 10 later this year. Trust me on this one. It's a good one. It's an album you want to take a look at. Folks, give The Bones of What You Believe by Chvrches a serious listen. And hell, if you believe that that title is a little too strident, or if you're not a fan of all those songs addressing you, yes you, the listener, the one who's watching this video, the one on the other side of this camera, well, I think this album might just be perfect for you after all. So yeah, I really enjoyed listening to this album. I urge you all to check it out. Thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming out that you might want me to take a look at, keep in mind that there are albums coming out for this year. I've got a pretty tight schedule as it is, so preferably not this year. I handle retrospectives a little bit later when I have more time. But until otherwise, see you next time.